Sometimes we hopefully comes back. Okay. Yeah. It's just kind of okay. It's good enough.
محمد وآل محمد صلوات اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم إني أسألك وأتوجه إليك بنبيك نبي الرحمة محمد صلى الله عليه وآله يا أبا القاسم يا رسول الله يا إمام الرحمة يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا أبا الحسن يا أمير المؤمنين يا علي بن أبي طالب يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا فاطمة الزهراء يا بنت محمد يا قرة عين الرسول يا سيدتنا ومولاتنا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيهة عند الله اشفعي لنا عند الله يا أبا محمد يا حسن بن علي أيها المجتبى يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا أبا عبد الله يا حسين بن علي أيها الشهيد يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا أبا الحسن يا علي بن الحسين يا زين العابدين يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا أبا جعفر يا محمد بن علي أيها الباقر يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا أبا عبد الله يا جعفر بن محمد أيها الصادق يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا أبا الحسن يا موسى بن جعفر أيها الكاظم يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا أبا الحسن يا علي بن موسى أيها الرضا يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا أبا جعفر يا محمد بن علي أيها التقي الجواد يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشرعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا أبا الحسن يا علي بن محمد أيها الهادي النقي يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا أبا محمد يا حسن بن علي أيها الزكي العسكري يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا وصي الحسن والخلف الحجة أيها القائم المنتظر المهدي يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله حاجة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا سادتي وموالي إني توجهت بكم أئمتي وعدتي ليوم فقري وحاجتي إلى الله وتوسلت بكم إلى الله واستشفعت بكم إلى الله فاشفعوا لي عند الله واستنقذوني من ذنوبي عند الله فإنكم وسيلتي إلى الله وبحبكم وبقربكم أرجو نجاة من الله فكونوا عند الله رجائي يا سادتي يا أولياء الله صلى الله عليهم أجمعين ولعن الله أعداء الله ظالميهم من الأولين والآخرين آمين رب العالمين.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
मोहम्मद वाले मोहम्मद सलवात।
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد
हाय ज़ैनाब लुट रही है ऐ अजीजो तुम कहाँ हो। हाय ज़ैनाब लुट रही है ऐ अजीजो तुम कहाँ हो। सूए कूफा जा रही है ऐ अजीजो तुम कहाँ हो। मेरे हाशिम के जवानों जुल्म से हम को बचाए। नौके नेज़ा सज चुकी है बीबियों की वो रिदाएं। हम पे हर शय रो रही है ऐ अजीजो तुम कहाँ हो। हमको दुर्रों से बचाए कोई एक तो सुन ले नौहा। दश्त गुर्बत कर रही है आज हम पर खुद भी गिरिया। मेरी दुनिया लुट गई है ऐ अजीजो तुम कहाँ हो। जिसको महमिल में सजा कर लाए थे मैं हूँ वो ज़ैनाब। अपनी निगरानी में रख कर लाए थे मैं हूँ वो ज़ैनाब। आज तन्हा हो गई है ऐ अजीजो तुम कहाँ हो। आले अहमद सह न पाएंगे सितम के ताज़ियाँ। के हैं वो तमाचे, बेबसी अब छा गई है, अहे अजीजो तुम कहाँ हो। मेरे बाबा मेरे बाबा शिमर मुझको है डराता, सूए मकतल रोक देती है सदा मेरी सकीना, खाक पे सो ना सकेगी, ऐ अजीजो तुम कहाँ हो। हाय ज़ैनब लुट रही है, ऐ अजीजो तुम कहाँ हो। सूए कूफा जा रही है, ऐ अजीजो तुम कहाँ हो। मोहम्मद सल्लल्लाहु
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It is with sadness that we inform you of the passing of Hassan of Kampala in Switzerland, who passed away today in London. She is the beloved mother of Dr. Ahmed Hassan of Dubai, Noshad Hassan, Zinat Muhammad Ali, Shahnaz Fazal, Fatima Farshuri, Shabir Hassan, Shamim and Shamim Abidi. She is also the aunt, the Fui of Auntie Sabira Dori. Can I please request for her and all Marhumeen to recite one Surah Al-Fatiha? Mu'min, could I please kindly request another Surah Al-Fatiha for the Marhumeen of Mirali and Ganji families, and for all Marhumeen, Surah Al-Mubarakat Al-Fatiha. Inshallah, we will now have the majlis to be delivered by Sheikh Fazil Basdatu. Can I please request that we welcome Sheikh with the loudest salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
اللهم صل على
الله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والحمد حقه كما يستحقه حمدا كثيرا الحمد لله رب العالمين الأول قبل أولية الأولين والباقي بعد فناء العالمين ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Mu'mineen, over the previous week on Thursday, the 3rd of September, the day when we observed the wafat of our fourth Imam, a very sad event took place which has robbed the Ummah of Islam, as per the hadith of the Ahlul Bayt, that the death of an alim creates a huge void or a huge gap into the fortress of Islam which cannot be repaired forever. And that was through the loss of one of the marja' idam, one of the grand marja' based in Najaf by the name of Ayatullah al-Udhama Sayyid Muhammad Sa'id al-Hakim. Marhum, mashallah, was one of those from the scion of the venerated, the most notable families of Al-Hakim family in Iraq, whose genealogy or the lineage traces all the way to the second Imam Al-Hassan Al-Mujtaba salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi. And whenever the name Al-Hakim is mentioned, for some of those people, especially for our grandfathers and our fathers, we recall that they had commenced performing the taqleed of the grandfather of this marhum, Sayyid Muhammad Sa'id al-Hakim, by the name of Sayyid Muhsin al-Hakim. And during those times, Sayyid Muhsin al-Hakim was one of the leading marja' who gave a very powerful fatwa denouncing the Ba'athist policies of the Saddam regime. And thereafter we know of how cruel and vicious the Saddam regime was. And one of those victims of the brutality of Saddam's regime was this marja' taqleed, Ayatullah al-Udhama marhum Sayyid Muhammad Sa'id al-Hakim, who spent close to 8 years in the prison. And there are living witnesses, testimonies of those who had been in prison with him. They have narrated these testimonies after his wafat, saying that even when they were in prison, because there was a large number of the selected people from the Al-Hakim family who were of that intellectual background, and as a result of Saddam putting them to the prison with that mission of trying to put a stop to the spread or the teaching of the learning of the mother of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam, Sayyid Muhammad Sa'id al-Hakim was known that in those years when he was in the prison, for amongst his family members who were in his company in the prison and the others, he was conducting dars of the Hawza of the highest level, being able to graduate students, such that when they were released, they were able to continue, and some of them have become grand personalities of Ayatollah in today's time today. And at the same time, whilst he was in prison, with no resources present for him of texts of Islam, he was still able to author a large number of manuscripts which have been published. So that gives us an idea of the status of his mental and memory capacity of being able to author those books in that moment when there is no resource of other references or library in his presence as such. Subhanallah for that. And the other outstanding thing with him is that marhum Sa'id al-Hakim and the whole family of al-Hakim were among those who were always promoting in their message with regards to the love. And it is this message of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam and promoting the mawqif, what we would say is the Husayniyas or the Imambaras or the Mahfil in our terminology, all right, promoting the establishment of mawqif and promoting the performance of Arba'in Ziyarah. Remember, these were during the times of Saddam Hussein. For us, we cannot be able to appreciate what it was, but the streets of Karbala used to be bare of any people around in the days of Ashura. You can imagine when we had lockdown over here, that was the scenario in Karbala and Najaf and Arba'in in the days of Azhar. Nobody would dare to do anything. To such an extent that if you recall, when our Marja Taqlid, Marhum Sayyid Al-Khui passed away, his burial was barely visited or taken by few of the leading personalities at that time, including our present Marja, Sayyid Ali Hussein Al-Sistani. And Sayyid Marhum Sa'id Al-Hakim was seen many times in the procession of Arba'in participating, and I have personally seen clips of him being of service to the Zuwar in the Arba'in, pushing wheelchairs of disabled people and pushing pram buggy chairs of infant children. And he would cry and he'd give a message that today it is only because of keeping alive the message of Azadari, the practices of Azadari, that this is the sadaqah which we get till today we are able to survive. So Mu'mineen, this I would like to link with what we have been discussing in our previous majlis on the Dasmo of Aba Abdullah Hussain alayhi salam with regards to the two objectives by which we as a community, our forefathers have put it down into us. That whatever comes, there is a change in our lifestyle, all right? We put into disposal all our resources and we want to achieve those two objectives. The first objective is that we constantly narrate and relate and revive the story, the narrative of the tragedy of Karbala by the grieving, by the condoling, by the reflection, by the education, and all that comes out in these, what we say as rituals of Azadari of month of Muharram, with one value, and that is to remind ourselves of the values and the mission which Abu Abdullah Hussain salam and his beloved companions and family members faced that sacrifice on the day of Ashura. That is the first objective. And the second objective is to take us to a higher level, that through these platforms of Azadari, it gives us an impulse, it revives into us a spirit and energy that never will the values for which Abu Abdullah Hussain salam and his beloved companion and family members gave that sacrifice of Shahada, never will they be forgotten. We will always keep alive the values of peace, freedom, justice, and message of closeness, taqwa towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For this was what Abu Abdullah Hussain had wanted to bring about, a reformation in the ummah. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad.
So having mentioned Marhum Sa'id al-Hakim, it would be fitting for us to give condolences to the Imam of our time, Sahib al-Asri wa Zaman, Ajallahu Faraj al-Sharif, at this great loss in the fortress of Islam, to the Ulama Ikram, to the Maraji Izam, to the Hawza, and to the Mu'mineen. And let us join in recital of Surah Al-Fatiha for the thawab of Marja Sa'id al-Hakim al-Fatiha. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillah. And at the same time, let us do dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by the wasiyah Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam for the good health and long life of our remaining ulama ikram and maraj' izam, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect them and guard them from any calamities at all times. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. So let us inshallah now proceed with presenting our salutations from the line of the ziyarah of Ashura. In reciting the ziyarah, all of us together, this except the paragraph of reciting the salam upon Abu Abdullah and his companions. Please join me. Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah wa ala al-arwah allati hallat bi finaik. عليك مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار ولا جعله الله آخر الأهد مني لزيارتكم السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين صلوات اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Based on the introduction of the two objectives for the mission of Abu Abdullah salam and for us to continue with the practice of observance of Azadari. If you recall, in the last majlis I had mentioned that our discussion in these two majlis will be in a very different domain. Unlike the majalis or unlike the domains which are covered in other majalis, where we look at the historical background, the ahadith and derived messages, and then look at the message and thereafter reflect upon it and have the azah or the condolences. What we have been doing is that we have been looking at a domain which we are calling it as the stimulus domain. In Arabic, we will say as al-muthir. To be able to understand stimulus, I will give an example that basically, for example, when there is cold wind coming in, you'll notice that the person will try to put on warm clothing. What has happened? There is a change in his behavior. What has brought about the change in behavior? It is because of that stimulus of cold, which is making him move. So the stimulus prompts about a change in a behavior, an impulse to do something, a reaction. So likewise, what we have been doing in the previous hadith is, we looked at 5 ahadith. We selected the number 5 based on the number of Ahlul Kisab. We selected 5 ahadith and we tried to find out ourselves without giving answers in the majlis, but as a question for you to reflect, that what is it which is stimulating you and I? What were those 3 things? The 3 things were, number 1, that we were asking ourselves that what is it with this tragedy of Karbala, when there is the narration narrated to us, what is it that is stimulating us into performing as an action of condoling the girya, the buka, the azadari of Abu Abdullah alayhi salam? Then the second question was, what is it when we hear these ahadith, which we heard last time, the 5 hadith, what are those key points which we find in those ahadith which are a stimulus, urging us or influencing us to put a stop and change our daily lifestyle? So we said, for example, come the month of Muharram, it becomes a very different month than the other normal months. We change in our lifestyle. All timetable changes. 4, there is something which is stimulating us to bring about that change. And the third one was, what is it that when it comes to the call of azadari of Abu Abdullah salam, that each and every person becomes generous in contributing towards the cause of azadari of Abu Abdullah salam. And contributing not only in terms of what we would say is financial resources, but whatever resources one has in his disposal. So for example, physical resource, volunteering, time, family, and there is a whole movement within the family, within the community and the society, that everybody is in that mindset of contributing in the name of azadari of Abu Abdullah. So there is something from 5 hadiths which we heard, which is stimulating us to do these 3 things. And that is, perform the azadari. Number 2, bring about a whole change in our lifestyle. And number 3, being charitable in contributing our resources towards azadari. So today, inshallah, we will now go forward and build up on those 5 hadiths which we visited on the last majlis of the Dasbo of Abu Abdullah Hussein alayhi salam, so that we bring about this conversation to a close as to the final conclusion with hearing this selection of 10 ahadith of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. Salawat.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
So the hadith which we will share today is from Imam Sadiq salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi,
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
where the Imam meets a person by the name of Misma. And the Imam says, أيها الناس اعلموا أن الحسين حي عند ربه يرزق من حيث يشاء. Pardon me. The hadith of Misma, we mentioned it last time. That was the 5th hadith. Today is the 6th hadith, where Imam Sadiq alayhi salam says, "O people, know that Hussein is alive with his Lord. Yurzaqu min haythu yasha." That means, as we know the ayah of the Quran, that do not consider those who have become shaheed, who have been martyred in the way of Allah, to be dead. Rather, they are alive, and Allah is giving them their nourishment. Trying to tell to the people, know that Hussein is alive with his Lord, and he is being provided sustenance from where he desires, that is, from where Allah desires. And then the Imam continues to say, وَهُوَ دَائِمًا يَنْظُرُ إِلَى مَكَانِ مَسْرِعَهِ وَمَنْ حَلَّ فِيهِ مِنَ الشُّهَدَاءِ. And when Imam Hussein al-Salam is alive, even at this very moment, he is watching at that area, the spot where that incident took place. That means the Qatlaga, where that incident took place in the land of Karbala, and where the incident with his other companions took place on the day of Ashura. So that is one of the vision which Imam is looking in his moment presently in his lifetime. So what is happening to the state of the Imam Hussein alayhi salam? So Imam Sadiq explains, وَهُوَ أَفْرَهُ وَهُوَ أَعْرَفُ بِهِمْ وَبِأَسْمَائِهِمْ وَأَسْمَاءِ آبَائِهِمْ وَدَرَجَاتِهِمْ وَمَنَازِلِهِمْ فِي الْجَنَّةِ. As the Imam is watching at that place, the spot where the Shahada took place, what is happening today? The spot is not empty. Today we have millions of people visiting that spot. Not only millions of people are physically visiting that spot, but those who are not able to visit, they also are facing towards that direction and reciting the ziyarah. So even that recitation of Assalamu alayka ya Abu Abdullah Hussein alayhi salam, in our spiritual world, we are actually transferring ourselves to be in the audience of Imam Hussein alayhi salam in performing that ziyarah. So what is happening in that state when Imam Hussein is alive and watching all those at that spot of the martyrdom? So the Imam says that the Imam is knowing about their names. Not only does the Imam know these persons' names, who are names of their parents, and he knows the status, the daraja or the manzil that these people will be in Jannah. And he is able to see those who are performing the buka upon him, those who are grieving upon him. What happens? فَاسْتَغْفَرُوا لَهُ, and Imam is asking for forgiveness for them. So this is another key word, that this is a stimulus which is making us do those 3 things. Perform azadari, bring a change in our lifestyle, and be charitable in all resources. Why? Because we see that none other than Imam is asking for istighfar. Wouldn't you and I like to have this diplomatic passport? So the Imam Sadiq says that the Imam is asking for istighfar. And how does the Imam do that? He says that he even asked his grandfather, the Holy Prophet, and he asked his father, Imam Ali, and he asked his mother, Sayyida Zahra, and he asked his brother, that is Imam Hassan alayhi salam, they also should seek istighfar for those who are doing that ziyarah upon him, and should seek istighfar for those who are doing that buka for him, and wal muqimina azah, and those who are establishing the azadari for him. So this again is another key word, that not only the istighfar from Abu Abdullah Hussein alayhi salam, But what is perhaps being a strong stimulus for us doing those three things, azadari, change in our lifestyle, and charitable for azadari, because it is Imam who is asking the Prophet, his grandfather, his father, his mother, and his brother, you too please seek forgiveness from Allah for this person, and they know their name and their father's name and the manzila in the Jannah over there. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So that is the first hadith for today. Then the second hadith which Imam Sadiq alayhi salam meets a person by the name of Fudel, Tajlisuna wa tuhaddithun. Do you people gather together and discuss about our affairs? What you would say in our words today, do you meet together and have majlis? Because what are we doing in a majlis? We are discussing about the affairs of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. So Imam is asking Fudel, do you meet and do those things? And Fudel tells him, yes, my master. May I be sacrificed for you? We do meet together. So the Imam tells him, Tilkal majalisu uhibbuha. Those type of gatherings, I indeed love them. This should be another clue for identifying the stimulus for doing those three things. Because it is participating in those gatherings which the Imam loves himself. Wouldn't you and I like to be there in those who live the pleasure of the Imam alayhi salam when he says, I love you being participating in this type of gatherings? The Imam says, فَأَحْيُوا أَمْرَنَا. When you are meeting in these gatherings, so what Imam is pointing out an instruction. Therefore, continue reviving our affairs. Or what we'd say is, therefore, continue in having these gatherings which are reviving our affairs of speaking about the message of Imamat and the message of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. Then the Imam says, Rahimallahu man ahya amrana. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have rahmah, have mercy upon those who revive our affairs. In other words, link it to what we said earlier, who established these type of gatherings. So here again, the clue of identifying that stimulus. In the hadith which we mentioned, a clue was istighfar. And the clue was not only from Imam Hussein alayhi salam, but him asking his father and grandfather and his mother and his brother to perform istighfar. In this hadith which I am now mentioning, a clue which is being told to us, Rahimallah. Istighfar is different. Seeking forgiveness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is something else. Rahmah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is something else. Getting that rahmah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is something else. And that is again a clue for identifying the stimulus for doing those three things. Bringing about a change in our lifestyle, performing the azadari, and become generous in contributing whatever resources we have at our disposal towards the mention of the mazadari of Abu Abdullah Hussein alayhi salam. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Ja'far bin Affan was known to be one of those poets during the time of Imam Sadiq alayhi salam. And he visited the Imam. And the Imam now tells him in that audience that I've heard about you reciting this poetry about my forefather. So Mu'mineen, when he tells him this, he also tells him, come closer. This again is a clue, identifying that stimulus. That there is that status for participating in the azadari of Abu Abdullah Hussein to be called to be in the audience. You know, just like when we go for a public meeting or let's say a football match, football matches, there are different types of seats in the stands. And every seat has got its value and there is an advantage position for sitting over there. Isn't it? And you would choose that seat which gives the most advantageous position. So imagine in the gathering of Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, the one who is now called to be brought closer towards him. What is it which has brought him closer? Because of something which he does which brings pleasure to Imam Sadiq alayhi salam. And then the Imam tells him, recite some of these verses in front of me. And he recites. The Imam cries to such an extent that the tears flow down his face and his beard becomes wet as a result of listening to what is the poem being recited in front of him. Thereafter, the Imam tells him, O Ja'far, I swear by Allah, لَقَدْ شَهَدْتُ مَلَائِكَةَ اللَّهِ الْمُقَرَّبِينَ هَاهُنَا. I swear by Allah, I have witnessed the angels, not just other ordinary angels, but the angels muqarrabina lillah, those angels who are very closest to the what deity of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala coming down, becoming present over here, and I can hear them and they are able to hear you reciting what you are reciting regarding Hussein alayhi salam. And they too are crying, and the way we have been crying, rather they have been increased in crying more than us. Identify the stimulus, the key word over here. وَلَقَدْ أَوْجَبَ اللَّهُ تَعَالَى. And then these angels doing dua, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised during that moment to provide them with spacious Jannah in the widest expanses for them. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has forgiven you for this. When Ja'far hears this, can you imagine you're told this thing? And Ja'far looks at the Imam. Perhaps he was amazed, and he looks at the Imam. So what does the Imam tell him? Oh Ja'far, shall I tell you more than this? He says, my master, please tell me. And he says, for any person who recites poetry about Hussein alayhi salam, and he performs that crying, that weeping, or he makes others weeping over Abu Abdullah Hussein alayhi salam, Allah gives nothing except for him, paradise, Jannah for him, and his sins become forgiven. Again, mu'mineen, just by relating this hadith I mentioned to you, we're not going to do any tafsir or any sharh or explanation. I want you to just identify those key words which are acting as stimulus for us to do those three things: participating in azadari, bringing a change in our lifestyle, and becoming generous in our resources. When I talk about participating in azadari, I mean the higher level, and that is taking the values, the mission of Abu Abdullah Hussein and bringing about a change in our lifestyle. Remember, Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Thereafter, having mentioned these hadiths from Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, let us look at the hadith during the time when the tragedy of Karbala is not even taken place. Remember, the tragedy of Karbala takes place in 61 after Hijrah. The Prophet Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali, there is a conversation with Sayyidah Fatima Zahra alayha salam. Before I narrate you this conversation, you and I are all aware from the numerous verses in the Quran and the traditions of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, the scene which is being described to us regarding the day of Qiyamah. The day of Qiyamah, a number of verses and the hadith of the Ahlul Bayt paint for us a very horrific, dreadful picture. To such an extent, the ayah of the Quran and the hadith mention to us that it is going to be truly individualistic, so much selfish, that even the bonds between the parents, the filial bonds between the family, between the mother and the child, or the brother and the brother, sister and the brother, will have no value. Everybody is running on his or her own way to be able to gather whatever they can gather and provide as deeds to be able to satisfy in moving away from Jahannam and going towards the path of Jannah. Very horrific scene is being described over there. But listen to what our Holy Prophet tells Sayyidah Fatima Zahra alayha salam. And that again will be able to identify a key word which is acting as a stimulus for us. The Holy Prophet tells his beloved daughter Sayyidah Fatima Zahra salawatullahi wa salam alayhi, Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Ya Fatima, Oh my dear Fatima, kullu aynin bakiyatu yawm al-qiyamah. All the eyes on the day of Qiyamah will be weeping. Obviously, we can imagine with what I have described to you, mentioning in the Quran and the Hadith. What would we expect from the eyes? Pleading, isn't it? Please forgive me. This thing which I had squandered from you, please forgive me. This thing which I have done backbited of you, please forgive me. Crying. Everybody is trying to make do and amend the rights of the people. Rights of Allah is different thing. Praying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, please forgive me. But rights of the people, where is that person? Alright? So everybody is busy crying, pleading, please forgive me. Those eyes are crying, definitely. But the Prophet says, كل عين باقية يوم القيامة. All the eyes will be crying on the day of Qiyamah. Naturally, for the state, miserable state in which those persons will be on the day of Qiyamah. إلا عين, except for those eyes. Which are those eyes? إلا عين بكت على مصاب الحسين عليه السلام. Another keyword over here for the stimulus. Except for those eyes, ayn, stimulate our eyes. All right? When I talk about the eyes, understand not only the physical eyes, needs to be the spiritual eyes. Remember last time in our majlis we mentioned about the spiritual eyes. Imam is mentioning when he was asked, why do you people perform this azadari even before the 10th day of Ashura? Remember? What does the Imam say? Let me tell you, when the advent of Muharram takes place, what do the angels do? All right, how the blood-soaked kurta or the tunic of Abu Abdullah Islam is waved in the sky like a flag, and we see it. And the Imam says, we see it not with our physical eyes, we see it with our spiritual eyes. And what happens? This is the result we see as a stimulus. So here, link that hadith over here, that all the eyes on the day of Qiyamah will be crying, except for which eye? Link that eye, the spiritual eye. إلا عين بكت على الحسين إلا عين بكت على مصاب الحسين, except for that eye which had cried upon Hussein alayhi salam. So even in this world, it's not only the physical eye crying upon Hussein alayhi salam. There is more to that which is expected, and that is the eyes of the heart, that it will turn us away to become Hur al-Riyahi, what took place on the day of Ashura, to become Zuhair ibn Qayn, who moved away from his journey towards Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Why? The spiritual eyes opened. The physical eyes were open on the day of Ashura. People watched, isn't it? They actually saw. But their hearts had become, what do you say, competing with each other to carry out the worst of the musibah on the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. Alright? So here the Prophet is mentioning, which is for us inshallah as the 9th hadith or the 4th hadith for today, identify stimulus, and the key word over here is that eye. What is happening? فَإِنَّهَا ضَاحِكَةٌ مُسْتَبْشِرَةٌ بِنَعِيمِ الْجَنَّةِ. Why will these eyes which are crying upon Hussein alayhi salam on the day of Qiyamah will not cry? These eyes will be happy. Why will they be happy? The Prophet tells Sayyidah Fatima Zahra alayhi salam, these eyes will be laughing, will be glad to receive the good news with the ni'mah of Jannah, with the rewards of paradise, Jannah. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Again, identifying that the stimulus should be such that it makes our spiritual eyes cry upon Abu Abdullah salam. And the impact of the spiritual eyes crying upon Abu Abdullah salam is on the day of Qiyamah, the physical body has no value. The spiritual body, the spiritual eye, because in this world we have turned away from those paths which are Yazidic and come towards the path of Labbaik Ya Hussein, which is the valleys of Hussein alayhi salam, will remain alive on the day of Qiyamah, that person will be given the good news, getting the ni'mah of Jannah. Thus that spiritual eye will not cry on the day of Qiyamah, inshallah. And finally, the 5th hadith for today, again in the number of the Ahlul Qisa alayhi salam, is that hadith which is indeed very powerful, where our beloved Prophet Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Allahumma inna liqatl Hussein, certainly indeed the effect of the qatl of Hussein alayhi salam is hararatun fi qulubil mu'minin, is such an impact on the believers, في قلوب المؤمنين, on the hearts of the believers, لا تبرد أبدا, that it will never get extinguished. Again, the key word over here is harara. The emotional, the effect, the heat which is generous, the energy which is generous, this is what is giving us that stimulus. What happens to that energy? When water, it was discovered, all right, when water is heated to a certain temperature, it now turns into steam. Don't allow that steam to go to waste. What happened? Was cannot utilize that steam to be able to drive the locomotive, the steam railway engine, isn't it? And we see today development has been made as a result of that. Harara, this heatness, let it not just go to waste. All right? Make it a powerful thing that it brings about an energy to take us towards those values which are the mission of Abba Abdullah Hussein alayhi salam. So this is another key word, and that is the harara. This harara is a stimulus which is making you and I do those three things. Perform azadari in the deeper level to bring about reformation in our life in this world. Number two, bringing about a total change in our lifestyle. And number three, we are indeed becoming generous in giving whatever we have in the way of azadari of Abba Abdullah. And then the hadith again, another keyword from this hadith, hararatan fi qulubil mu'minin. Remember, this is not ordinary thing. It will have an impact if it is on the hearts of the believers. Isn't it? The steam which comes about, the energy which comes about is one which is going to be the status of determining where is that person on the side of Iman. If that person is getting affected by these events of the tragedy of Karbala, it is an indicator of the side of Iman which that person is. But if the person is not getting affected by the indicators of Karbala to such an extent that today we find ruling states promoting distortion about the tragedy of Karbala, we definitely know what is the state of the Iman, that they call those heinous criminals, the founders of the today's ISIS, to become people as Amir al-Mu'mineen. You know for yourselves, textbooks have been written, distorting the tragedy of Karbala, calling those players who actually brought about this tragedy of Karbala, a person like most evil like Yazid, being given this title which I just mentioned, not befitting to be mentioned in the member of Rasulullah. This itself shows that what is the Iman is just what we see, the long beards and the white flowing robes. That is not which is the heart of the mu'mineen, which is being mentioned by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The heart of the mu'mineen is that which becomes impacted by the heat, the energy from the martyrdom of Abba Abdullah. So mu'mineen, the 5 hadith for today, Allah has given us the tawfiq in the name of the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. The previous majalis 5 hadith, and today the majalis on the wisdom of 5 hadith, 10 hadith, which brings about a summary. And that is what I mentioned to you, that these values, these practices, mu'mineen, have really survived the turn and the tide, most heinous and severe, what we say, climates have faced by the Shias. Message is, let us be Zainabi at all times and guard ourselves at all in not doing anything which is the values of Yazid. Marhum Sa'id al-Hakim, Marja Marhum, in one of his dars, and this is a majlis, I've been following the majlis Azza after his death, his burial, which take place in all the haram. And this I'm mentioning to you with authenticity, recited in the Sahan of Imam Musa al-Qadim salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad, by one of his students who was giving that majlis of ta'aziyah, saying that I would like to narrate to you about a personal incident in my life with the Marja Sayyid al-Hakim. He says that it was during those times when he was attending the Darsul Kharij, and Sayyid al-Hakim was conducting that dars, and it was also the difficult times of the Daesh, who were taken out that message that very soon we will come close to Karbala and Najaf and Kadmain, and you are all gone. Very, very frightening and dangerous words were being pronounced about Murder. And Iraq, as we know, was in a very difficult situation. It was only as a result of the efforts spearheaded by our present Marja Taqleed, Ayatollah Udama Sayyid Ali Hussein Sistani, and the companionship of all the other Maraji Idam in Najaf, including Marhum Sa'id al-Hakim, that they gave out the fatwa. All right? And that is how the mobilization force was brought about, and the Daesh till today have been dealt with, and Iraq has regained its izzah. And you and I and all around the world, mashallah, for us ziyarah is just booking a ticket online. But the Maraji and the Shuhada really paved that way with the bodies, what we see today. So coming back to what I was saying, this student says in those times, after we finished Dars al-Kharij, we were all frightened, worried, what happens? So we asked Sayyid al-Hakim that today the Daesh have announced this way, and we are really very much worried. I'm paraphrasing, not mentioning the actual situation or the quote, but paraphrasing, conveying to you the message which was mentioned in that majlis. What will happen for us? All right? So he says, I saw Marhum Sa'id al-Hakim looking at me with a calm composure. The way he would conduct his classes, looking at me with a calm composure and addressing in the public, he says, again I'm paraphrasing, but the message was this, that let me tell you, the message of Ahlul Bayt right from time immemorial has faced severe oppression, calamities, and great torture. Till today, the message has survived. And we will go through these times and the message will survive. This itself is an indication of the truthness, the originality, or the realness of this message. And that is why 1400 years till today, this message has survived. And again he mentioned, giving advice, hold fast to this marathim of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, to these traditions of Azadari, of Abba Abdullah Hussein alayhi salam. So mu'mineen, finally, before we come to the Masaib of Abba Abdullah Hussein alayhi salam, I would like to share with you one of the anecdotes mentioned, who was a leading scholar, just passed away in the early days of Muharram, this Muharram. Marhum Ayatullah al-Faqih al-Had Sayyid Adil Alawi. In one of his majalis, some 4 years before, which he conducted in a mawqif in Qom, he mentions about an incident. And I would like you to link that incident to the nasiha which Sayyid al-Hakim had mentioned, holding steadfast to Azadari, linking it to the 10 ahadith which we have been talking over, alhamdulillah. And Marhum Sayyid Adil Alawi says that some 60 years before, the Sahan of Abba Abdullah Hussein alayhi salam, for those who have gone for ziyarah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept our ziyarah. And we pray, Ya Allah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us once again that opportunity to go again, inshaAllah. When you see the Sahan, when we enter, let's say for example, entering the skylight, all right, the roof over there, that was not there previously. That used to be a maqbara, that used to be a qabristan. The actual haram used to be the other door which you see, the golden door, second door over there. So that used to be a maqbara, qabristan. Now it is all tiled. In fact, when I went the previous time for ziyarah, we were able to identify so many graves which were buried in the vaults down other than the Sahan. But the second time when I went for Ba'in, we are no longer able to identify those graves because they have now even built what you say basements in that Sahan. So you have basements or sardab even in that Sahan over there. So Marhum Sayyid Adil Al-Alawi says in that majlis that at that time, 6 years before, when this place was a maqbara, There was an old lady who had died, and she was able to get space to be buried in that maqbara or that qabristan in the sahan of Abu Abdullah Hussein alayhi salam. And the way the burial takes place is not like what we have, a single burial grave or two burial graves. Yeah, some of you are familiar. They would dig a vault. There would be a basement, and inside that basement there would be so many graves. And then so you would have many people buried over there. So when you're walking over the sahan, you're not walking on one grave, but actually walking on so many graves. Right? So a man by the name of Haji Abdul Rida had been assigned the duty of burying that dead of that lady that day. And the opportunity to be buried in the sahan of Abu Abdullah salam. And Haji Abdul Rida was given the task of lowering the coffin. So there would be a tray. After everybody has said the wida, there would be a tray. The tray would be lowered, and then the person goes down to be able to put the tray into that slot for that vault. All right? So that process would not take more than 15-20 minutes as such. And the person who had gone down with the tray would then come up. After he comes up, then the slab is put, and the earth is put inside of the slab, and again it's placed over there. So you'd see a qabristan over there, a dead. So Haji Abdul Rida, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 25 minutes, 30 minutes, up till now, he has not come up. People started becoming worried. So they started calling. Naturally, what would you do? Haji Abdul Rida, Haji Abdul Rida. They started calling. They did not hear him. What is the next thing you do? What do you think you do next? Go down, isn't it? So one or two people started going down inside. When they went down, do you know what did they see? They saw Haji Abdul Rida had lost consciousness. And they could see on his face shock, but he has lost consciousness. Immediately, they rushed to bring him up. As they brought him up, and then they started reviving him. Haji Abdul Rida gained consciousness. When he gained consciousness, his first reaction was, where are the children of this lady? Get for me the children of this lady. Baba, wait, Haji Abdul Rida, what happened to you? Get for me the children of this lady. Can you imagine the shock and the fright? Get for me the children of this lady. So because the burial had just taken place, so one son was present over there. I am the son. He said, come closer. When he came closer, he asked him, tell me, what is the secret of your mother with Imam Hussein alayhi salam? Tell me, what did she do for Imam Hussein alayhi salam? And the son just looked at Haji Abdul Rida saying, I don't know what you say. He said, tell me, what did your mother do? Did your mother, for example, regularly recite Ziyarat Arba'in? Or did your mother regularly recite Ziyarat Ashura? Or did your mother perform ziyarah? Or did your mother regularly attend the majlis of Imam Hussein alayhi salam? And this man looked at Haji Abdul Rida. You can imagine somebody is questioning all these things. He said, my mother did none of these things. Tell me something which your mother did for Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Then the son said, after a while he gave a thought. He said, let me tell you, my mother had two habits. We come from a very poor family. We have nothing except a small garden where we grow vegetables. And my mother had two habits. At many moments, or at all moments, we could see on her eyes that sadness, and on her tongue she would mention, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein. That was one habit. And the second habit, from that garden, for 6 days of the week, we would harvest whatever was there. For example, let us say it would be cabbages, or let us say it would be some onions or some potatoes. We would harvest for the 6 days and eat from that for the 6 days. What do we do on the 7th day? On the 7th day, our mother used to tell us, children, today we are not going to eat first. We will harvest this food, and then we will take it and distribute to the Zubar of Hussein alayhi salam. What in our words today would say, arrange the Barruk. What we'd say as Fatiha. Give it to the Zubar of Hussein alayhi salam. And this has been a practice of till the time close to her death. She used to have these two traits with her. Mu'mineen, I'm narrating this incident to you as I told you. This was recited in a majlis by one of my teachers. So this man, Haji Abdul Raza, now tells the people around him, did you hear what this his son say? These two habits with this mother, the old lady had with her. When I went down over there, as has been our tradition, we would prepare the body to make the body lie towards the Qibla, and we would open the coffin. So there's a way we would open the coffin and then make the body lie towards Qibla. As I started commencing to touch the dead body and to perform these final rites, I heard a voice coming from the direction of the Zarih of Abba Abdullah Hussain alayhi salam, yelling to me, telling me, Da'aha, leave her alone, leave her alone. Hadihi dhayfatuna al-layla. Leave her alone, leave her alone. This lady is our guest for tonight. As soon as I heard this voice, I just don't know what happened, and I find myself now here with you. So what would have happened? He must have heard that voice coming with such conviction, coming with such karamat, coming with such excellence, coming with such spiritual power, all right? That just the effect of that voice and the translation of that message, don't do anything. This is our guest for tonight. Leave this person. Mu'mineen. Is there anything else which can still convince us that what we are doing indeed is the right thing, what we are doing? And if up till now, I cannot convince anybody that whatever we are doing, we are perhaps not being able to do whatever we could have done, I for myself, I'm admitting and raising my hand and saying, please forgive me. Whatever I could have done, I'm admitting I'm still not able to do all those three things which you have mentioned. Please, Mu'mineen, hold steadfast to this very powerful institution of Azadari. Inculcate the way the Prophet has been telling us, teaching to your children the recitation of the Quran and the love of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. Loving of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam is being able to put into action these 10 ahadith which I have mentioned from the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. Not by saying that I love the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, but by actually putting into practice the values for which the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam live their life for this world, number one. Number two, being able to bring about a change in our lifestyle, not only in the days of Muharram, but in all other days, so that we follow the path of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. And number three, not only being generous during the moments of Azadari, but being generous at all times towards keeping alive the message of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam and the mission of Azadari of Abu Abdullah alayhi salam. Mu'mineen. The way we hear this voice, Haji Abdul Raza is mentioning that leave her alone, she is our guest for tonight. Can you imagine what must have been going through the hearts of the family of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, the hearts of the prisoners from Karbala to Kufa, from Kufa to Sham, when they are being paraded as prisoners, and they see at the head of the caravan, they see spears raised high in the sky. And these are no ordinary spears. These are spears on which at the top have been placed whose heads? They see for themselves there, a sister is seeing the head of the brother being raised on the spear over there. And there a father, a daughter, an orphan child, 6 years old, perhaps Sakina, is seeing the head of her beloved father raised on the spear over there. And there must be another daughter is seeing the father's head raised over there. And there is another lady who is seeing the brother's head being raised over there. And this is how the procession of the prisoners of Karbala is taken from Kufa and taken towards Sham in this procession, the way it's taken. He tells us, Dhakirin tells us that a time comes when Sayyida Zainab looks at the head which is resembling the head of the beloved grandson of the Holy Prophet. And at that moment, Sayyida Zainab gives out a cry saying, Ya Rasulullah, oh my beloved Prophet Muhammad Mustafa, look at this is the head of Hussein, where you can see that her blood is flowing from the head and the hairs have become disheveled. This is a crescent which did not even rise. This is the peace of my heart. And this is, oh brother, look at your son Zainul Abidin in this procession over here. How Zainul Abidin is being taken as a captive and Zainul Abidin is also orphaned. Look at your small children, Sakina, being chained over here and being dragged as prisoners over here. And when we just try to cry, how we are being flawed, calling out to you helplessly. Oh Hussein, oh my brother wa akha, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein. Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein. Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein,
Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein.
Ya Fatima Zahra, 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 Ya Fatima Zahra. उम्मत ने बहुत आपको करवाया है बीबी, हर हक के लिए आपको तरसाया है बीबी। गासिब ने जो दरबार में बुलवाया है बीबी, इस दुख से लरजने लगा खुद अर्श खुदा का। या फातिमा ज़हरा, या फातिमा ज़हरा, या फातिमा ज़हरा, या फातिमा ज़हरा। माँ खाना खिलाती है तो फिर खाते हैं बच्चे, जाती है जहाँ माँ वही आ जाते हैं बच्चे। बिन माँ के कभी चैन नहीं पाते हैं बच्चे, काम आता है बच्चों पे बहुत माँ का सहारा। या फातिमा ज़हरा, या फातिमा ज़हरा, या फातिमा ज़हरा, या फातिमा ज़हरा, या फातिमा। सीने में अज़ल से ही मेरे करबला में जाती हुए ज़हरा ने दुनिया से कहा है, क्या शाम में होना है सब मुझको पता है। कटते हुए सहरा में शबीर का लाशा। या फातिमा ज़हरा, या फातिमा ज़हरा, या फातिमा ज़हरा, या फातिमा ज़हरा, ये काम रहा सदियों से बस ले अज़ा था, प्यासों के लिए बेटा रहा अश्कों का दरिया। शबीर का पुरसा दिया जहरा को हमेशा शबीर को दो मादरे शबीर का पुरसा या फातिमा ज़हरा या फातिमा ज़हरा या फातिमा ज़हरा या हमने अभी
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليك يا رسول الله، السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين يا سيد المرسلين، السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين، السلام عليك يا حسن المجتبى، السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله الحسين وعلى 9 المعصومين من ذريتك علي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي والحجة بن الحسن القائم المنتظر المهدي عجل الله تعالى فرجك سهل الله تعالى مخرجك وظهورك والسلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته.
اللهم صل على محمد.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم كل وليك حجة بن حسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه ورزقك وتمتعه فيها طويلا. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد.
Mu'mineen, please can I kindly request you to take your seats and please follow the instructions of volunteers with regard to leaving the centre. As we have a program, can I ask that we end with the recitation of Surah Al-Fatiha.